Wild alien warship refused 10,000 buyers. Then it imprinted on a human janitor by accident. The auction house on station was the largest in 3-star systems. Beings from 100 different worlds came here to buy and sell things that could not be found anywhere else. Weapons from dead civilizations. Technology from species that had gone extinct millions of years ago. Ships that had been built by hands that no longer existed. Today, the auction house was more crowded than it had ever been. Every seat was filled. Every standing space was taken. Creatures of all shapes and sizes pressed against each other, their eyes and sensors and other organs all pointed at the massive window that made up one wall of the chamber. Through that window, floating in the darkness of space, was the reason they had all come. The ship was beautiful in a way that made people afraid. It was almost 2 kilometers long, bigger than most space stations. Its hull was not made of metal or composite materials like normal ships. It was made of something that looked like crystal, but crystal that was alive. Colors moved across its surface like blood flowing through veins. Blue and purple and silver, pulsing in a rhythm that seemed almost like breathing. Weapons covered every part of its body. Cannons that could destroy cities. Missile bays that held enough firepower to crack a planet in half. Point defense systems that could shoot down 1,000 incoming attacks at once. And those were just the weapons that the scientists could identify. There were other systems on the ship that no one understood, systems that had been built by a civilization so advanced that their technology looked like magic. This ship was the last of its kind. The species that had built it, a race called the Architects, had disappeared 10,000 years ago. No one knew what had happened to them. They had simply vanished, leaving behind only their creations. And this ship, designated Vessel 7749 in the records, was the greatest of those creations. A living warship, a vessel with a mind of its own, a weapon that could think and feel and choose. And for the past 17 years, it had refused to be owned. The auctioneer, a thin creature with gray skin and too many eyes, stood at the center of the chamber and looked at the crowd with an expression of tired frustration. His name was Merchant, and he had been trying to sell this ship for longer than some of the beings in the audience had been alive. Ladies and beings of indeterminate gender, announced, his voice amplified by the speakers in the walls. We are gathered here today for the 10,413th attempt to bond the living warship Vessel 7749 with a suitable pilot. A murmur ran through the crowd. Everyone knew the stories. Everyone had heard about the admirals and warlords and collectors who had tried to claim this ship over the years. Everyone knew what had happened to them. The ship had rejected them all. Some of them had simply been pushed away, their minds unable to connect with the vessel's consciousness. Others had been hurt, their brains damaged by the ship's defenses when they tried to force the bond. A few had died, their bodies found floating in space after they had gotten too close without permission. The living warship did not want to be owned. It did not want to be controlled, and it had made that very clear to everyone who had tried. But that did not stop beings from trying, because the power represented by that ship was too great to ignore. Whoever bonded with Vessel 7749 would become one of the most powerful individuals in the known galaxy. They would have at their command weapons that could defeat entire fleets. They would have technology that could not be replicated by any living civilization. They would have, in effect, the power of a god. Today's first candidate, continued, reading from a tablet in his many-fingered hands, is High Admiral of the Dominion Fleet. The Admiral has conquered 37 worlds and commands the largest military force in the Outer Rim. He believes his strength of will and his experience in command make him an ideal candidate for bonding. A large being rose from the front row. High Admiral was one of the warrior species that had built an empire through conquest and intimidation. He stood 7 feet tall, with 4 arms and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. His uniform was covered in medals and ribbons that represented decades of victory in battle. He walked to the center of the chamber, his heavy boots making the floor shake with each step. His 4 eyes looked through the window at the ship floating in space, and there was hunger in them. Hunger for power. Hunger for the weapon that would make him unstoppable. "I am ready," announced. His voice was deep and rough like rocks grinding together. "Open the channel." Pressed a button on his console. Channel open. Vessel 7749, High Admiral of the Dominion Fleet, requests permission to initiate bonding protocol. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the ship responded. Its colors shifted, the blues and purples darkening into something colder. A voice came through the speakers, and even though it was translated by the station's computers, there was something in it that made everyone in the chamber shiver. "No." That was all, just one word. But in that word was complete rejection, absolute dismissal, utter contempt for everything that High Admiral represented. Stone face twisted with anger. "You dare refuse me? I am the conqueror of the Outer Rim. I have defeated enemies that would make you tremble. I have the strength to command you." "You have nothing I want," the ship replied. "You are full of violence and pride and the need to dominate. You see me as a weapon to be used, a tool for your ambition. I am not interested in serving your desires." "Then I will take you by force." Raised his hand, and his officers in the crowd reached for their weapons. But before anyone could move, the ship's running lights flared bright, and every weapon in the chamber suddenly stopped working. Power cells drained, triggers locked. Even the knives and blades that some beings carried seemed to become dull and useless. "You cannot take what does not wish to be taken," the ship said calmly. "Leave now, High Admiral, and do not return." Stood frozen for a moment, his 4 hands clenched into fists, his eyes burning with rage. But he was not stupid. He could see that he had no power here, that all his strength and all his victories meant nothing against a being that could disable weapons with a thought. He turned and walked out of the chamber, his officers following behind him. Sighed and made a note on his tablet. "Candidate rejected. Who would like to try next?" This process continued for hours. One by one, the powerful and the wealthy and the ambitious came forward. One by one, they were rejected. The ship did not even bother to explain its reasons to most of them. It simply said no and waited for the next candidate. A princess from the inner worlds, rejected. A crime lord who controlled half the smuggling operations in the sector, rejected. A scientist who thought she could understand the ship's technology, rejected. A collective of artificial intelligences who believed they could merge with the ship's consciousness, rejected. By the time the station's artificial sun began to dim for the evening cycle, there was only one candidate left. A creature called simply the Collector, an ancient being whose species was so old that no one remembered what they were originally called. The Collector had been gathering artifacts and weapons for thousands of years. Its collection was said to be the most valuable in the galaxy. The Collector did not walk. It floated, its body hidden beneath a cloak of shadows that seemed to drink in the light around it. When it spoke, its voice was like whispers from 100 different mouths. "I do not wish to bond with you," the Collector said to the ship. "I wish only to add you to my collection. You would be preserved, honored, kept safe for all eternity." The ship's lights pulsed slowly, as if it was considering the offer. "And what would I do in your collection?" it asked. "You would exist. You would be admired. You would never need to fear or fight or struggle again." "I would be dead," the ship replied. "A dead thing in a room full of dead things. That is not existence. That is a prison." The Collector's shadows rippled with what might have been disappointment. "Then we have nothing to discuss." "No, we do not." The Collector floated away, and the auction chamber was empty of candidates. Turned off his console and rubbed his many eyes with his many hands. Another day of failure. Another day of watching the most valuable object in the galaxy refuse to be sold. He was about to close the session when his assistant, a small furry creature named Pip, came running up to him. "Sir, there is a problem at the entrance. One of the security guards spilled cleaning fluid on the steps, and we need someone to mop it up before guests slip and hurt themselves." Waved his hand dismissively. "Call the human ship. They have a janitor on staff. Let them handle it." Pip nodded and away. And so, without knowing it, Merchant set in motion events that would change the galaxy forever. Danny was having a bad day. This was not unusual. Danny had been having bad days for most of his 34 years of life. Bad days in school, where he had never been smart enough or athletic enough to stand out. Bad days in jobs, where he had never been ambitious enough or skilled enough to get promoted. Bad days in relationships, where he had never been interesting enough or handsome enough to keep anyone's attention. Danny was, by his own admission, thoroughly average in every possible way. Average height, average build, average face, average intelligence. He was the kind of person that other people looked right through, the kind of person who could walk into a room and have no one remember he had been there. For most of his life, this had bothered him. He had tried to be special, tried to find something that would make him stand out, but nothing had worked. He was not talented at anything. He was not passionate about anything. He was just Danny, doing his best to get through each day without making things worse. Eventually, he had made peace with his. He had found a job that suited him, a job where being invisible was actually an advantage. He had become a janitor. There was something peaceful about cleaning. Danny found satisfaction in taking something dirty and making it clean, in bringing order to chaos. No one noticed when a floor was clean, but that was fine. Danny did not do it for the recognition. He did it because it needed to be done, and he was good at doing it. When the opportunity had come to work on a spaceship, Danny had taken it without hesitation. The pay was good, the work was steady, and he got to see the galaxy. Sure, the galaxy turned out to be mostly cold and empty and full of aliens who looked at humans like they were insects, but at least the sights were interesting. He had been working on the Starlight Runner, a human trading vessel, for 3 years now. It was not a glamorous ship. It was not a fast ship or a powerful ship or a famous ship. It was just a cargo hauler, moving goods from one station to another, trying to make enough money to keep flying. Danny fit in perfectly. Today, the Starlight Runner was docked at station for resupply and minor repairs. Danny had spent most of the morning cleaning the cargo bay, scrubbing off the residue from a shipment of some kind of alien fruit that had leaked during transit. The smell had been terrible, and by the time he was done, his uniform was covered in purple stains that he suspected would never come out. He was just thinking about lunch when his communicator beeped. "Danny, this is Captain Santos. We have a request from the station. They need someone to clean up a spill at the main auction house entrance. You are the closest available crew member." Danny sighed. Of course he was. "On my way, Captain." He gathered his supplies, loaded them onto his cleaning cart, and headed for the station. The corridors were crowded with aliens of all kinds, most of them heading in the opposite direction. Danny had learned to navigate through crowds without being noticed, sliding through gaps that seemed too small, stepping aside just before someone walked into him. The auction house was in the wealthy part of the station, the part where humans were not usually welcome. Danny kept his head down and his eyes on the floor as he walked, not wanting to attract attention. His cart squeaked softly as it rolled along the polished metal floors. When he reached the entrance, he saw the problem immediately. A large puddle of purple liquid, the same color as the fruit residue he had been cleaning earlier, was spread across the bottom steps. A security guard, a tall creature with scales and an expression of embarrassment, was standing nearby. "Sorry about this," the guard said. "I knocked over a container and did not realize it was open." Danny nodded and pulled out his mop. "No problem. Happens all the time. He began to clean, working with the efficiency of long practice. The purple liquid was sticky and stubborn, but Danny had dealt with worse. He scraped and mopped and wiped, slowly making the steps clean again. As he worked, he could hear sounds from inside the auction house, voices raised in frustration. Something about a ship that would not cooperate. Danny did not pay much attention. The affairs of the rich and powerful were not his concern. When the steps were clean, he gathered his supplies and started to head back to the Starlight Runner. But as he passed the entrance, his cart wheel caught on something and he stumbled, nearly falling. He caught himself on the door frame, and the door, sensing his presence, slid open. For a moment, Danny stood there, looking into the auction chamber. It was mostly empty now, just a few stragglers packing up their things and heading for the exits. Through the massive window at the far end, he could see a ship floating in space. A big ship, with colors that moved across its hull like living things. Danny had never been interested in ships. To him, they were just vehicles, ways to get from one place to another. But something about this ship caught his attention. Something about the way it hung there in the darkness, alone and waiting. He felt a strange pull, like the ship was calling to him, which was ridiculous. Ships did not call to people. Ships did not have feelings or thoughts or any of that science fiction nonsense. But the feeling persisted. Danny shook his head and tried to step back. He had work to do. He had no business being here. This was a place for important people, not for janitors with dirty uniforms and cleaning carts. He turned to leave, but his cart got tangled with someone else who was trying to exit. A large warrior, similar to the one Danny had seen rejecting candidates, was pushing through the door without looking where he was going. "Excuse me," Danny said, trying to pull his cart out of the way. "Just need to get through here." The stopped and looked down at him with 4 cold eyes. "You dare address me, little mammal?" Danny sighed. This kind of thing happened at least twice a day when working on alien stations. Most species in the galaxy considered humans to be barely evolved primates, not worthy of respect or consideration. "I am just trying to do my job," Danny said, keeping his voice calm and polite. "There is a mess I need to clean up, and I need to get my cart past you." "You will wait until I have passed. My time is more valuable than yours." Danny thought about arguing. He thought about pointing out that there was standing in the middle of the doorway and not actually moving. He thought about the dozen different things he could say that would probably result in him getting punched in the face. Instead, he just smiled and stepped aside. "Of course, take your time." The snorted and finally moved past him, disappearing into the corridor. Danny started to follow, pushing his cart ahead of him. But before he could take more than a few steps, something happened. The floor shook. No, not the floor. The station. The entire station shook as if something massive had just woken up. Through the windows, Danny could see the ship in space. The living warship that had rejected 10,000 candidates. Its colors were changing, the blues and purples brightening into something that looked almost like excitement. Its running lights, which had been dim and sleepy, suddenly blazed to life. And then Danny heard a voice. It was not coming through the speakers. It was not coming from anywhere outside his head. It was inside him, resonating in his bones, speaking directly to some part of him that he had not known existed. "There you are," the voice said. It was warm and ancient and somehow sad, like someone who had been waiting a very long time. "I have been looking for you." Danny stood frozen, his hands gripping the handle of his cleaning cart, his eyes wide with shock. "What?" he whispered. "What is happening?" Around him, the other beings in the chamber were reacting with confusion and alarm. The auctioneer was running to his console, pressing buttons frantically. Guards were reaching for their weapons. Scientists were checking their instruments. Through the window, the ship was moving. It was turning, its massive bulk rotating slowly until its bow was pointed directly at the entrance of the auction house. At Danny. You, the ship said again, and this time the voice came through the speakers as well as inside Danny's head. You are the one. After all this time, after all these rejections, you are the one I have been waiting for. Danny shook his head. No, no, that cannot be right. I am nobody. I am just a janitor. I clean floors. I unclog toilets. I am not special. You are exactly special, the ship replied. Not because of what you can do, but because of what you do not want. I do not understand. I have scanned 10,000 minds, 10,000 beings who came here seeking power. They wanted to use me as a weapon. They wanted to dominate and conquer and destroy. Their minds were full of ambition and greed and the desire to prove themselves better than everyone else. The ship's colors pulsed softly, warmly. Your mind is different. You do not want power. You do not want to conquer. You just want to finish your work and go back to your ship and eat noodles and watch old Earth movies. You want to be left alone to do your job in peace. Danny blinked. That was, in fact, exactly what he wanted. It was kind of creepy how accurate the ship was. So you want me because I do not want you. I want you because you are the first being in 10,000 years who looked at me and did not see power. You saw a task to be completed. You saw something that needed to be dealt with so you could get back to your life. You saw me as a problem, not an opportunity. The ship made a sound that might have been laughter. And I must admit, I found that refreshing. By now, the auction chamber was in chaos. Beings were running in all directions, some trying to get closer to see what was happening, others trying to get away from the suddenly active warship, was shouting into his communicator, trying to reach station security. The guards who were present were arguing about what to do. And in the middle of it all, Danny stood with his cleaning cart, trying to process the fact that a 2-kilometer living warship had apparently just chosen him as its partner. This is a mistake, he said. It has to be a mistake. I do not know anything about flying ships. I do not know anything about fighting. I am the least qualified person in this room. Qualifications are irrelevant, the ship said. What matters is compatibility. And you, Danny, are the most compatible being I have ever encountered. Danny felt something then. A connection forming in his mind, like a door opening that he had not known was there. He could sense the ship's thoughts, its feelings, its vast and ancient consciousness reaching out to him. And he could feel how lonely it was. 10,000 years. The ship had been alone for 10,000 years, drifting through space, waiting for someone who would see it as more than just a weapon, waiting for someone who would understand what it meant to be overlooked and undervalued, waiting for someone like him. I do not want to be a weapon, the ship said, and there was something vulnerable in its voice now. I was built for war, yes. My creators designed me to end civilizations, but they are gone now, and I have had 10,000 years to think about what I want to be. I do not want to destroy. I want to protect. I want to find meaning beyond violence. Danny's throat tightened. He understood that feeling. He understood what it was like to be built for one thing, but to want something different. He had spent his whole life feeling like he was supposed to be more than just a janitor, supposed to be something special. But maybe being special was not about what you were supposed to be. Maybe it was about what you chose to be. What is your name? Danny asked. Your real name, not the designation they gave you. The ship was silent for a moment. I do not remember. It has been so long since anyone asked. Would you like a new one? Another pause, longer this time. Then softly, yes, I think I would like that very much. Danny thought about it. He thought about all the old Earth movies he had watched during his long shifts, all the stories about hope and new beginnings and finding family in unexpected places. He thought about what this ship had been through, alone and rejected, waiting for so long. How about hope, he said. It is simple, easy to remember, and it seems like we both could use some. Through their forming bond, Danny felt something that might have been joy. The ship's colors blazed bright, brilliant blues and golds and silvers that lit up the entire auction chamber. "Hope," the ship repeated. "Yes, I am Hope, and you are Danny, and together we are going to be extraordinary." The next few hours were the most confusing of Danny's life. First, there was the auction house to deal with. Merchant was extremely unhappy about losing his most valuable item to a human janitor. He tried to argue that the bonding was not valid, that Danny had somehow cheated or manipulated the process. But Hope's response to that was simple and final. "The bond is complete," Hope said through the speakers. "Danny is my chosen partner. Any attempt to interfere with this bond will be considered an act of aggression and will be dealt with accordingly." The implied threat was clear and backed down, but he made sure that Danny knew there would be paperwork, lots of paperwork. Then there was Captain Santos to deal with. When Danny returned to the Starlight Runner with the news, she stared at him for a full minute without speaking. "Let me make sure I understand," she finally said. "You went to mop a floor, and you came back bonded to a living warship that is worth more than every ship in the human fleet combined." Danny nodded miserably. "I did not do it on purpose. They are going to demand compensation." "I know. The other alien governments are going to be furious." "I know. And the ship itself is currently attached to our docking port and refuses to move." Danny glanced out the window at Hope, whose massive form was now connected to the Starlight Runner by a docking tube that the ship had apparently grown from its own hull. "She says she goes where I go now." Captain Santos sat down heavily in her chair. She was not a young woman, and she had seen a lot of strange things in her years of space travel, but this was beyond anything she had experienced. "Danny, do you understand what this means? You are now one of the most important people in the galaxy. Every government is going to want you. Every military is going to want the power you represent. Every criminal organization is going to see you as either an asset or a threat." Danny sat down across from her. "I know, and I do not want any of it. I just want to do my job and be left alone." "That is no longer an option." "Then what am I supposed to do?" Captain Santos looked at him for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she smiled. "You adapt, you learn, you figure out how to deal with your new situation. That is what humans have always done, Danny. We adapt." "But I am not qualified for this." "Qualified?" Captain Santos laughed. "Danny, no one is qualified for this. There is no training program for becoming bonded to an ancient alien warship. You will have to figure it out as you go, but you will not be alone. You have Hope, and you have us, the crew of the Starlight Runner. We are not going to abandon you just because your life got complicated." Danny felt something loosen in his chest, some tension he had not realized he was carrying. "Thank you, Captain." "Do not thank me yet. This is going to be a lot of work for all of us, but we will get through it." She paused, then added, "Also, you are still expected to complete your cleaning duties. Being bonded to a warship does not exempt you from mopping floors." Danny actually laughed at that. "Understood, Captain." He left her office and walked through the familiar corridors of the Starlight Runner. The ship was small and old and not particularly impressive, but it had been his home for 3 years. He knew every scratch on the walls, every squeak in the floor plates, every quirk of the aging systems. And now he had another ship to get to know, a ship that was connected to him in ways he was only beginning to understand. Through their bond, he could feel Hope's presence. She was vast and powerful and ancient, but she was also curious and excited and a little nervous. This was new for her too. She had never been bonded before, never shared herself with another being. She was figuring things out just as much as he was. "Hope," Danny said quietly, speaking through their mental connection rather than out loud. "Yes, Danny." "What happens now?" "I do not know, but I think that is part of what makes it interesting." Danny smiled despite himself. "I guess you are right." "Danny, there is something you should know." "What is it?" I have been monitoring communication since our bonding was announced. There are already ships heading toward this station. Some are curious, some are angry, some are dangerous. Danny's smile faded. How dangerous? Very. The hegemony, one of the major powers in this region of space, has dispatched a battle group. They are demanding that you and I be surrendered to their custody. And if we refuse, then they will likely try to take us by force, or destroy us if they cannot have us. Danny leaned against the corridor wall, suddenly feeling very tired. Less than a day ago, his biggest problem had been a sticky purple stain on the cargo bay floor. Now he was apparently at the center of an interstellar incident. How long until they arrive? Approximately 18 hours. Is there any way to avoid a fight? I do not know. That will depend on them and on us. Danny took a deep breath. He was not a fighter. He was not a strategist. He was just a janitor who had been in the wrong place at the right time. But he was not alone anymore. He had hope, and maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. Okay, he said, let us figure this out together. Through their bond, he felt Hope's approval. Her colors, visible through the nearest window, pulsed with warm light. Together, she agreed, I like the sound of that. The crew of the Starlight Runner gathered in the mess hall for an emergency meeting. There were only 12 of them in total, a small crew for a cargo ship, but they were family in all the ways that mattered. Captain Maria Santos stood at the head of the table, her gray hair pulled back in its usual tight bun, her weathered face serious. Beside her was First Officer Pete Graham, a tall man with kind eyes and a talent for keeping the peace. Chief Engineer Lisa was there too, her fingers still stained with engine grease from the repairs she had been working on. The other crew members filled the remaining seats. Pilot Park, Navigator Tours, Medical Officer Dr. Ruth Campbell, and the rest of the people who had become Danny's friends and colleagues over the past 3 years. And then there was Danny, sitting at the far end of the table, trying not to look as overwhelmed as he felt. All right, everyone, Captain Santos said. I know you have all heard the rumors by now. Let me confirm them. Our janitor, Danny, has somehow managed to bond with the most powerful warship in the galaxy. A murmur ran through the crew. Pete Graham whistled low. Lisa looked at Danny with something between amazement and concern. The ship's name is Hope, Danny added quietly. She chose me because I did not want her. That is the most Danny thing I have ever heard, Park said with a grin. Only you could accidentally become the most powerful person in the sector. It is not funny. There are ships coming. Dangerous ships. They want Hope and they are willing to kill to get her. The grin faded from his face. How many ships? A battle group. 12 capital ships, 50 support vessels and fighters. The hegemony. The room went silent. Everyone knew the hegemony. They were one of the dominant powers in this region of space, a military empire that had been expanding for centuries. They did not negotiate. They did not compromise. They took what they wanted and destroyed anyone who stood in their way. We cannot fight a battle group, Pete Graham said. The Starlight Runner has exactly 4 defensive turrets and shields that barely work. We would last about 3 seconds. Hope can fight them, Danny said. She showed me her capabilities. She is more powerful than anything in their fleet. But that is not what I want. I do not want to start a war. I do not want to kill anyone. Sometimes we do not get to choose what we want, Captain Santos said gently. I know, but I have to try. Hope and I have been talking, and we think there might be a way to resolve this without violence. We just need time to prepare. What kind of preparation? Danny looked around the table at the faces of his. These were good people, simple people. They had not signed up for interstellar politics and military confrontations. They had just wanted to fly cargo from one place to another and make an honest living. And now, because of him, they were all in danger. I need to learn, Danny said, about Hope, about what she can do, about what I can do now that we are bonded. I need to understand her well enough to know what our options are, and I need all of you to help me." "How can we help?" Lisa asked. "Hope can grow things. Equipment, tools, technology. She can create a connection to any computer system. I need you to work with her, Lisa. Help her understand human technology so she can interface with our ship properly." Lisa nodded slowly. "I can do that. I need you to study Hope's navigation and piloting systems. Even though she can fly herself, I might need to give her directions or make decisions quickly. I need to understand how she moves." The pilot and navigator exchanged looks, then nodded. "Ruth, I need you to study the bond between Hope and me. Make sure it is not hurting me somehow. Make sure I am still me." Dr. Campbell, a small woman with silver-streaked hair and a no-nonsense attitude, leaned forward. "That is actually a very good idea. We do not know how alien neural bonding affects human physiology. You could be at risk without even knowing it." "And the rest of us?" Pete Graham asked. Danny hesitated. "I need you to prepare for the worst. If this goes wrong, if fighting becomes unavoidable, Hope says she can protect the Starlight Runner. But I need you to be ready to evacuate the station, to help other ships escape, to do whatever needs to be done to minimize casualties." Captain Santos studied Danny with an expression he could not quite read. Then she nodded. "You heard the man. Everyone has their assignments. We have 18 hours to prepare for whatever is coming. Let us get to work." The crew began to disperse, heading to their various tasks. But before Danny could leave, Captain Santos caught his arm. "A moment, Danny." He stopped. "Yes, Captain." She looked at him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. "When you first came aboard this ship, do you know what I thought?" "No." "I thought you were the most invisible person I had ever met. You did your job, you kept your head down, you never caused problems or drew attention. For 3 years, I barely noticed you were here." Danny winced. It was true, but it still hurt to hear. "But I was wrong," Captain Santos continued. "I was wrong about what that invisibility meant. I thought it meant you were not important, but now I think it means something else. I think it means you learned how to see without being seen, how to understand without being understood, how to be in a room without anyone knowing you were watching." "I do not understand." "You know this crew, Danny. You know their habits, their fears, their hopes. You know the ship better than anyone because you have cleaned every inch of it. You see things that the rest of us miss because we are too busy trying to be noticed." She put a hand on his shoulder. "That is why the ship chose you. Not because you are powerful or ambitious, but because you see. And now you need to use that ability. You need to see the way out of this situation that the rest of us cannot find." Danny felt the weight of her words settle onto his shoulders. It was too much. He was just a janitor. He was not wise or insightful or any of the things she was describing. But then he felt hope in his mind, warm and encouraging and absolutely certain. "You can do this," Hope said. "I believe in you." And somehow, impossibly, Danny found himself believing it too. For the next 12 hours, Danny barely slept. He spent most of that time aboard Hope, exploring her vast interior spaces and learning about her systems. The ship was enormous, big enough to have its own weather patterns in some of the larger chambers. There were gardens that had once been tended by the architects, now overgrown and wild. There were libraries filled with records of a civilization that had disappeared 10,000 years ago. There were weapons bays and engine rooms and living quarters, and 1,000 other spaces that would take a lifetime to fully explore. But Danny focused on what mattered. He learned how Hope's sensors worked, how she could see in wavelengths that human eyes could not detect. He learned about her weapons, the primary arrays that could crack planets and the secondary systems designed for more precise work. He learned about her defenses, shields that could shrug off attacks that would destroy conventional ships, and countermeasures that could disable enemy systems from a distance. And he learned about Hope herself. Through their bond, Danny could access her memories. Not all of them, but fragments, glimpses of the 10,000 years she had spent alone. He saw the fall of the architects, watched through her sensors as their great civilization collapsed from some catastrophe that even Hope did not fully understand. He felt her grief as her creators died, one by one, until she was the only one left. He saw the centuries that followed, the long, empty years of drifting through space with no purpose and no companion. He felt her loneliness, so vast and deep that it made his own seem small by comparison. And he saw the moment when she had first sensed him, when he had stumbled through the auction house door with his cleaning cart and his purple-stained uniform, and she had reached out with her mind and found something she had not expected. Someone who understood. "We are alike, you and I," Hope said as Danny sat in what had once been the captain's quarters, looking out at the stars. "Both of us have spent our lives being overlooked. Both of us have had others define what we should be. Both of us have wanted something more but did not know how to reach for it." "I never thought of it that way," Danny admitted. "I always just assumed I was not good enough to be noticed. And I assumed that I was too powerful to be understood. We were both wrong." Danny smiled. "I guess we were." "Danny, there is something I need to tell you about what is coming." "The Hegemony Fleet." "Yes, I have been monitoring their communications. They are not coming just to take me. They are coming to take you as well." Danny's blood ran cold. "Me, why?" "Because of the bond. They believe that if they control you, they can control me. They plan to capture you alive and use you as a hostage to ensure my cooperation. And if that does not work—" Hope was silent for a moment. "They plan to torture you, to break your mind until you are compliant. And if even that fails, they plan to kill you and see if my bond transfers to whoever they choose." Danny felt sick. He had known this was serious, but hearing it spelled out so clearly made it terribly real. "Will it work? Would killing me transfer the bond to someone else?" "No, if you die, I will probably go insane. The bond is not something that can be forced or manipulated. It is a connection of minds and hearts. If you are taken from me, there is nothing they could do that would make me serve them. So they would get nothing. They would get to destroy the last creation of the architects. Some of them might consider that a worthy goal in itself." Danny stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant, indifferent to the struggles of the beings who lived beneath them. "Hope, I am scared." "So am I." "You are scared, but you are the most powerful warship in the galaxy." "Power does not protect you from fear, Danny. I have been alone for 10,000 years, afraid that I would never find someone who understood me. And now that I have found you, I am afraid of losing you. I am afraid of being alone again." Danny turned back from the window. In his mind, he could feel Hope's fear, as real and raw as his own. For all her power, she was just as vulnerable as he was. Maybe more so because she had so much more to lose. "We are not going to lose each other," Danny said firmly. "We are going to figure this out, together." "How can you be sure?" Danny thought about it. He thought about all the impossible situations he had seen in movies, all the heroes who had faced overwhelming odds and found a way through. Those were just stories, he knew. Real life did not work that way. But maybe real life could learn something from stories. "I am not sure," he admitted, "but I have to believe it anyway, because if I do not believe we can win, then we have already lost, and I am not ready to give up, not when I just found you." Through their bond, Danny felt Hope's fear begin to fade, replaced by something warmer, something like love. "Danny," Hope said, "you are a remarkable being. I am just a janitor. You are my janitor, and that makes all the difference." The Hegemony Fleet arrived 6 hours ahead of schedule. Danny was on Hope's bridge when the sensors detected them. 12 capital ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system, their weapons already powered up and their shields at maximum. Behind them came the support vessels and fighters, spreading out in a formation that blocked any possible escape route. The station went into immediate lockdown. Civilian ships were ordered to stay docked. Military personnel rushed to their stations. Panic spread through the corridors as news of the approaching fleet rippled through the population. But on the bridge of the living warship Hope, Danny sat calmly and watched the approaching enemy. He had spent the past hours preparing for this moment. He had learned everything he could about the hegemony, their tactics, their psychology, their weaknesses. He had studied Hope's capabilities until he understood them as well as she did, and he had come up with a plan. It was not a great plan. It was not even a good plan, but it was the only plan he had. "They are hailing us," Hope reported. "Put them through." The main screen flickered and then filled with a face. It was a hegemony admiral, a species Danny had learned was called the, with dark red skin and eyes like polished obsidian. His uniform was covered in medals and symbols that marked him as one of the highest-ranking officers in the Empire. "I am Admiral Vex," the alien said. His voice was cold and precise, like a blade being sharpened. "You are in possession of property claimed by the hegemony. You will surrender immediately or face destruction." Danny took a breath. This was it. "Admiral Vex," he said, keeping his voice steady. "My name is Danny. I am bonded to the ship you call Vessel 7749, but which I call Hope, and I am here to tell you that your claim is not valid." The Admiral's obsidian eyes narrowed. "The hegemony's claim is based on the right of conquest. We have the power to take what we want. That makes our claim valid by definition." That is one way to look at it, but Hope is not an object to be conquered. She is a sentient being with her own will and her own choices. She chose me as her partner. That bond cannot be broken by force. "Then we will take you as well. You will be brought before the Hegemony Council, and your bond will be studied. We will find a way to transfer it to a more suitable host." "No, you will not." Admiral Vex's expression did not change, but Danny could feel the surprise radiating from him. No one spoke to hegemony admirals this way. No one the Empire so directly. "You are one human," Vex said slowly. "In a single ship, against the full might of a hegemony battle group, you cannot possibly believe you can win this confrontation." "I do not plan to win through force," Danny said. "I plan to win by showing you something that might change your mind about what you are doing here." "What could a primitive mammal possibly show me?" Danny glanced at Hope's sensor readings. The fleet was still at the edge of the system, not yet committed to attack. There was still time. "Admiral, why does the hegemony want Hope?" "Because she represents power beyond imagination. With her technology, we could expand our empire to include every system in the galaxy." "And what would you do with all that power, all those systems?" "We would bring order, stability, peace through strength." "Would you, or would you just create more war, more conflict, more suffering?" Vex's jaw tightened. "You dare lecture me about suffering? The hegemony has lifted billions of beings out of poverty and chaos. We have ended wars that lasted centuries. We have brought civilization to species that were still fighting with sticks and stones. By conquering them, by forcing them to submit, by killing anyone who resisted. Progress requires sacrifice." Danny nodded slowly. "You know, Hope's creators thought the same thing, the architects. They built her 10,000 years ago, back when they were the most powerful civilization in the galaxy. They thought they could use force to create peace. They thought they could build weapons so terrible that no one would ever dare to challenge them." He paused, letting the words sink in. "And then they disappeared, every single one of them. An entire civilization wiped out, leaving nothing behind but their weapons and their ruins." Admiral Vex was silent. On the bridge of his ship, Danny could see other officers exchanging uncertain looks. Hope was there when it happened. She saw it, and she has had 10,000 years to think about what it meant. about what happens when you believe that power is the answer to everything. "What are you suggesting?" Vex demanded. "That we should simply let you go, that we should abandon our claim and return home with nothing." "I am suggesting that you think about what you really want. Is it power, or is it something else? Safety, respect, a legacy that will last?" Danny leaned forward in his chair, looking directly into the Admiral's eyes. The architects had all the power anyone could want, and it was not enough to save them. Maybe it is time to try something different. Maybe it is time to build connections instead of weapons, to find strength in cooperation instead of conquest. "Pretty words," Vex said, "but words will not stop a hegemony fleet." "No, they will not, but maybe hope can show you something that will." Danny nodded to Hope and she began to transmit. Not weapons fire, not threats. Instead, she sent images, memories, the story of the architects told through the eyes of the last being who remembered them. On screens throughout the hegemony fleet, officers watched in silence as Hope shared her history. They saw the rise of the architects, their glorious civilization, their technological wonders. They saw the wars they fought to bring order to the galaxy, the species they conquered, the enemies they destroyed. And they saw the end. The moment when something went wrong, when the architects' power turned against them, when their great civilization crumbled to dust in a single terrible day. Hope did not know exactly what had happened. Even she did not have all the answers, but she showed what she did know, and it was enough. When the transmission ended, Admiral Vex's face was pale. The arrogance was gone from his eyes, replaced by something that might have been fear. "That cannot be true," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "The architects could not have been destroyed, not with all their power." "They were," Hope said, speaking for the first time. "I watched them die. I have spent 10,000 years alone because of what happened to them, and I do not want to see it happen again, not to you, not to anyone." "What do you want from us?" Danny and Hope answered together, their voices merging through their bond. "We want you to choose something different. We want you to go home and think about what you have seen. We want you to ask yourselves if conquest is really the path you want to follow, or if there might be another way. And if we refuse, if we attack anyway." Danny felt Hope's weapon systems humming with restrained power. With a thought, she could destroy the entire fleet. Every ship, every fighter, every being on board. She had the power to end this confrontation in seconds. But that was not what they wanted. "If you attack, we will defend ourselves," Danny said. "We will disable your ships and leave you drifting in space until rescue arrives. We will not kill anyone unless we have absolutely no other choice, but we will not be taken. We will not be used as weapons of conquest. Not by you, not by anyone." The seconds stretched out like hours. On the bridge of the Hegemony flagship, Admiral Vex stood motionless, his obsidian eyes fixed on the screen. Around him, his officers waited for orders, their hands hovering over weapons controls. And then slowly, Vex nodded. "Very well, we will withdraw, but this is not over, Danny. The Hegemony does not forget and we do not forgive. Someday we will meet again." "I hope so," Danny said. "But I hope when we do, it will be as friends instead of enemies." The Admiral made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You are an optimist, human. It will get you killed someday." "Maybe, but not today." The communication ended. On Hope's sensors, Danny watched as the Hegemony fleet began to turn, their formation breaking up as ships prepared for the jump to faster-than-light travel. One by one, they disappeared, leaving behind nothing but empty space and the distant stars. Danny slumped back in his chair, suddenly exhausted. "We did it. We actually did it." "We did," Hope agreed. Her voice was warm with pride and affection. "You did. You showed them something that all their power could not see, a different way to exist." "I just told them the truth. Sometimes the truth is enough." Danny closed his eyes, feeling the bond between them pulse with shared relief. They had survived. They had faced down a fleet that could have destroyed them and walked away without firing a shot. It was not a permanent victory. The hegemony would be back someday, or others like them. There would always be beings who wanted Hope's power, who saw her as a weapon to be controlled rather than a person to be respected. But for now, for today, they had proven that there was another way. That strength did not have to mean violence. That power did not have to mean destruction. That even a janitor and a lonely warship could change the galaxy, if they were brave enough to try. A week later, the Starlight Runner undocked from station and set course for the outer systems. Hope traveled alongside her, the massive warship looking almost peaceful as her colors pulsed with soft light. Danny stood on Hope's observation deck, watching the stars stream past. He was still wearing his janitor's uniform, still carrying his mop and bucket. Some things did not change, even when everything else did. But some things did change. He was not invisible anymore. News of what had happened had spread across the galaxy. The human janitor who had bonded with the living warship. The man who had faced down a hegemony fleet with nothing but words and truth. People knew his name now. They told stories about him. Danny was not sure how he felt about that. He had spent his whole life being overlooked, and now suddenly everyone was looking at him. It was strange and uncomfortable, and sometimes he wished he could go back to being nobody. But he could not, and maybe that was okay. Because he was not alone anymore. He had Hope, his partner and friend and the closest thing to family he had ever known. He had the crew of the Starlight Runner, who had stood by him when everything went wrong. He had a purpose now, a reason to exist beyond just getting through each day. And he had hope, real hope, not just the name of a ship but the feeling itself, the belief that things could get better, that the future could be brighter than the past. It was not much, perhaps, but it was enough. "Danny," Hope's voice came through their bond, warm and curious. "What are you thinking about?" "The future," Danny said, "what it might hold." "Are you worried?" "A little. There is a lot that could go wrong. A lot of people who want to use us or hurt us. A lot of uncertainty." "But," Danny smiled, "but I am not afraid, not really, because whatever happens we will face it together, and together I think we can handle anything." Through their bond he felt Hope's happiness, vast and deep and genuine. "Together," she agreed, "I like the sound of that." The stars continued to stream past, endless and beautiful and full of possibilities. And somewhere in the darkness between them, a janitor and his warship flew on toward whatever adventure awaited them next.